X-Men style opening credits.
The future.
Patrick Stewart is always a win, even if he's narrating. Actually, scratch that, especially when he's narrating, dripping that sweet British honey into my ears. Sunspot, Blink, Warpath, and Bishop were pretty exciting to see for the comic fans, and pretty recognizable either by appearance or powers. And Sunspot actually looks like the surface of the sun with solar flares coming off of it. Favorite addition to the X-Men this time around has to be Blink's portals. So many fun possibilities, and most of them cashed in on. Adaptation. Since everything is pretty much reset because of this film, they don't hold back on apocalypsing the future. Desolate landscape and mutants are getting killed left and right. Bravery. As far as terrifying, unstoppable villains go, the Sentinels are about as bad as it gets. A Reddit poster said it best. I hated the Sentinels. Because of that, I love them. No, seriously, Patrick Stewart is always a win. Love that slight pause and then the hint of an ominous theme for Magneto. Future X suits are futuristic.
After Mystique left Charles, she came with me, and I set her on a dangerous path.
Admitting your mistakes when you were a different actor.
I mean, you don't really age, so you'll pretty much look the same.
That's actually strangely true. I'm starting to think that Hugh Jackman may actually be Wolverine and he's only retiring so no one starts to get suspicious.
I have faith in him. Tell him I'm worried about it, son.
Love that. Magneto knows himself all too well. Appropriate song for waking up in a new place for the first time. Again. Jackman has never been quite as Wolverine-y as he is in this film. So yeah, Hugh Jackman's workout routine. Never gets old.
Peaceful thought.
Peaceful thoughts.
And you will have lost 2 wars in 1 lifetime.
Peter Dinklage is always a win.
Sorry, Dr. Trask, but your Sentinel program, it ain't gonna fly.
Even Congress enjoys a good pun. Playing right into the dark path Magneto sent Raven down, she's a very different character from the one we left in First Class. She no longer covers herself up and she seems to yearn to kill someone. But she also kicks some butt. Also brutal. Fun little continuity tie-in from the Death March at the beginning with Ink showing up in the past.
Sure there's not a little beast in there? Come on, beast.
He's not here.
Come on, beastie.
It's as if no one told Hugh Jackman how serious this movie is. And he couldn't care less if he's the star or not. He has an irreverence towards these kids that fits perfectly. Just because Xavier is a telepath doesn't mean he has an eidetic memory. So the expletive isn't exactly the same, but the sentiment is. I know it's a little on the nose as a heroin addiction metaphor, but McAvoy nails the 70s drug abuser in look, attitude, and brokenness.
What else explains a bullet miraculously curving through the air?
I don't know, trying your best not to kill Angelina Jolie? Fun fact, some of the mutants in the autopsy reports are actually crew members.
Go upstairs and bug your sister.
But she bugs me.
Well, if she's anything like her MCU counterpart, that's probably because of the nightmares. They don't always bring everything over from the comics, but still they give us references like the skateboards hanging all around and some well thought out touches like the scorch marks on the doormat and carpet from Quicksilver's Speed. I can't believe Hank didn't beast out of the Twinkies.
I'm holding your neck so you don't get whiplash. What? Whiplash.
Rescuing your dad. I'm not going to say that I don't like Age of Ultron's version of Quicksilver's movements, but come on, this is the definitive standard.
Must have done something pretty serious. What'd you do, man? What'd you do?
And one more perfect representation of Quicksilver with his impatience.
Imperative that you understand we are in complete lockdown situation. We have to get you to the 3rd floor.
Diplomacy win.
You know, my mom once knew a guy who could do that.
Eric's face.
Sorry, I'm just not very good with violence.
Charles.
Irony. Which brings us to arguably the best sequence, best character interpretation, and the most fun set piece in the entire film. Just top-notch scene. And a little defense of why they don't bring Peter with them. They had to entice him with the Pentagon to get him to help in the first place. So what would be his incentive to go to Paris? Plus, he's a kid. Plus, they had no clue events would unfold the way they did. Especially Eric's change of heart.
I sacrificed my powers so that I could sleep.
We got to see young, optimistic, slightly reckless Xavier in First Class, and now McAvoy delivers tortured, lost soul flawlessly.
You should have fought harder for them.
If you want to fight, Eric, I will give you a fight!
Let him come.
I also feel the need to point out that an Irishman, a Scot, and an Aussie, all with thick accents, are having a conversation, and not one of them is using his native accent.
Want to pick all that up?
I didn't kill the president.
Would you try and save him? Because he was one of us.
Any bets on what JFK's mutation was? Some kind of pheromone manipulation that made him irresistible?
Girl I raised, she was not capable of killing.
Didn't raise her, you grew up with her.
This entire conversation is a win. Like, Every line. I could go through and win each line. The rapport between these two is amazing, and when you throw the pseudo-love triangle into the mix, it's just stellar. Again, both sides of the argument have merit. Both men are in pain, and there's no clear right and wrong, evidenced by Charles' usual steadfast commitment to his ideals being shaken.
You must think me so foolish. You've always said they would come after us. You have the first move.
And this foreshadowing. Magneto moves first to prevent the inevitable, i.e. killing Raven. I can't even with this film. Ooh, that transition. That's some CGI blending sorcery. You guys have seen Wanted, right? It's not just me that feels the intense irony of the bullet bending around James McAvoy, right? Also, how freaking cool under pressure is Magneto? Oh, you're tackling me? I'll just do this.
Somebody gave you really bad acid. Yeah.
Helping a friend take a trip. You know, it's the little things that really make me jealous of Magneto's powers. Hands-free, everything.
Killing one man isn't enough.
It never was for you.
Shaw reference. The first step is admitting you have a problem.
And you unlocked my mind.
The student-teacher swap is so beautiful. And Logan knowing well enough that he's not the right man for the job.
I don't know how to do that for you.
You poor man.
And Charles validating Logan. Somehow that one line delivered by McAvoy does justice to the many Wolverine torture films we've all seen.
Charles.
So Quicksilver's slow-mo scene is definitely the best set piece, but young and old Xavier meeting? As a novelty, it doesn't get any better. And then on top of that, you throw old Charles renewing young Charles' faith in humanity?
Eric was right. Humanity does this to us.
Not if we show them a better path.
Back on the plane, Charles accepted Eric's outlook that humans and mutants can never coexist peacefully. It's a scene that truly crushes Charles in multiple ways and leaves him completely uncertain about what he's been fighting for. And then he's reinvigorated by his older self.
Please, Charles, we need you to hope again.
And then chooses to sacrifice his own desires for the greater good. Moving message.
It's the greatest gift we have, to bear their pain without breaking.
First hint at how powerful Magneto has really become since First Class, ripping up those railroad tracks with very little effort.
Rogue.
She's in Cerebro. She's in your house, Professor. They're experimenting on her.
Logan cutting Kitty is the first main story thread that sets the Rogue storyline up, and now this is the first real step towards it. I get why they cut it. It makes everything feel a bit bloated and falls into the just give them something to do category.
Just bring yourself back.
The one thing the Rogue cut does do is accentuate the bittersweet closure. Even though everything gets fixed, Kitty and Bobby lose their relationship, which is sad, but gives the whole changing history thing more gravity and consequence. Charles hopscotching in people's brains to keep up with Raven.
I was wondering if you could tell me, in the future, do I make it?
No.
Honesty.
We're going backward in time.
The Naked Time reference. Star Trek. It's the one where Sulu takes his shirt off and fences. And the original series is always a win. That might get tricky if I ever do original series films. So you're probably all confused at this point, but this is a whole nother sequence that was cut and is only in the Rogue version. It's nice to be reminded of the relationship that Raven and Beast shared, but since she ends up using him just to disable Cerebro, it only adds to her dark path. This is one sequence that was cut that actually works really well, even if it's a tad redundant once we get to the finale. But one Magneto working with the X-Men and the other working against is fun juxtaposition.
Hello, Logan.
Either way, I'm happy to see Rogue and Logan back together again. Sort of.
There's so many of us. We will need you, Professor.
I'll do my best.
Your best is enough.
This character swap hits its peak right here. Gives me goosebumps every time I hear it. Xavier spent multiple films shaping Logan into the man who has now played a huge part in bringing Charles back from the brink. Haha, no medal.
What happened to you? Friendly fire.
He's even got a bit of a Lieutenant Dan thing happening. Wow. Now we get the full measure of Magneto's power and how much his strength and control has increased. Floating a stadium while controlling the Sentinels? It's so satisfying to see Ian McKellen's Magneto finally working with and helping the X-Men. Especially Storm, a constant adversary in the original trilogy. Even if Fassbender is just wrecking everything about as classically Magneto as ever. I mean, is there anything more comic Magneto than dropping a stadium around the White House to kill the president? Badass, bad guy. This is the redundancy I was talking about earlier, and it's the better of the two options for sure. We've got one Magneto doing exactly the types of things that will create this future, or worse, while the other is willing to sacrifice himself to save his friends and ultimately all mutants.
Speedy thing goes in, speedy thing comes out.
So as far as brutal things go, Wolverine has the ability to absorb more brutality than most. Deadpool's up there too, but having rusty rebar snaked in and out of your body, then being drowned over and over again until he was found, Yeah, that's some new levels of brutal. Emma Frost, Darwin, and Lady Deathstrike.
All those years wasted fighting each other, Charles. To have a precious few of them back.
The original cast getting to have their reconciliation moment is a definite win. Saving the humans.
Shut her down, Charles. I've been trying to control you ever since the day we met.
What really sets this film apart is again making a character-driven plot. The original plan was simple. Stop Raven and prevent the Sentinels from ever being created. Once Eric becomes a wild card and they end up with her blood anyway, the plan shifts. This closes out a 2-film arc for Xavier. And this line,
If you make me, I will stop you.
perfectly plays into Charles' final character arc. Finally learning that he needs to trust Raven and allow her to make the right decision instead of controlling her. Ha! 2 wins here. Ariadne is finally teaching architecture, and Kitty appears to be with Colossus, a long-running relationship in the comics. I know everyone's all excited that this film undid The Last Stand, but really, Jean is at least a little Phoenixy in this future. I guess we can't say for sure if she went full Dark Phoenix, but she only ever had that much red in The Last Stand. And since she already resurrected herself once, just saying. But also, Jean and Scott are alive! Ultimately, this future is just really soothing. All the X-Men are alive and back together. The mansion isn't blown up, it's a real comic-style reset with the X-Men ready to start a new adventure. Finally, an explanation for the pyramids that makes sense. Literal 4 horsemen. I stand by First Class being my favorite X-Men film, but man is this one a close second. Maybe I'm just partial to the 60s? Although I have to give Matthew Vaughn credit for the period piece feel of First Class. Bryan Singer brings some 70s spy thriller aspects into this film, but strictly on era tone, it doesn't quite live up to First Class. However, Bryan Singer proved he's still got it. He can tell a story, and he can help mold irresistible characters. It's his little touches that I really appreciate, though, like the X's all over the place, the insane attention to detail in the Quicksilver scene, or the extra bending railings as Magneto pulls the bunker out, and little knowing glances and looks that you notice more and more as you rewatch his films. He also handled time travel about as well as can be expected. Unless you're putting it up against Primer, but what would be the point of that? I read a few complaints that compel me to point out that it was very clearly explained that while Wolverine was under, the 2 realities existed simultaneously.
As long as you're back there, past and present will continue to coexist. But once you wake up, whatever you've done will take hold and become history.
So no change would take effect until he woke up. Other than that, some people were upset that The Last Stand was undone. I can't really help you there. Another thing that First Class did was prove that X-Men films could work without Wolverine. Not that he's not amazing, and seeing him interact with younger versions of his friends and enemies was really fun.
Imagine if they were metal.
But I fully appreciate that he gets thrown in the water for most of the finale, because these characters can stand on their own 2 feet. Sometimes. Michael Fassbender got the Gold Star last time, and really that was more his origin story as the man with the arc. Charles was a little more consistent throughout, but the tortured, broken, conflicted James McAvoy gets all the Gold Stars for Days of Future Past. This is really his film, and I can't say enough good things about him and his talent. His story arc is central to the theme of this film. As old Xavier puts it,
Hope.
and as we already discussed, hope for the future, hope for Raven, belief in humanity and mutants, and the contrast of the fairly mundane 70s with a hopeless Xavier to the completely desolate future with an optimistic Xavier. Such a layered film. And while the future is tied neatly in a bow, the past is pretty much still in turmoil with Magneto and Mystique fleeing, Charles having to start over, and also this guy. He's coming for us. The rest of the cast was phenomenal. Hugh Jackman really blended with the young and old cast perfectly and didn't steal the show too much. Even if Peter Dinklage was a little underused, he was a great secondary villain. All except for this one line.
Is that a new scarf? It's nice.
I guess that's probably how Jennifer Lawrence would read that line. It's just kind of odd. I love it anyway. Filling in Brian Cox's younger shoes is a task I don't envy, and Josh Hellman does a great job. Just as condescending and elitist. And I'm also just now realizing that he plays Slit in Fury Road, which makes 3 shared actors including Nicholas Hoult and Zoe Kravitz. 4 if you count Hugh Jackman's request for Tom Hardy as the next Wolverine. Coincidence? Yeah, most likely. But here's to hoping the next X-Men film will be helmed by George Miller.
Why not? He's producing Justice League?
Well, at least there's that.
It's cool, it was disgusting.